The council chamber of the Galactic Federation was a place of profound silence and ancient power. Carved into the heart of a dead moon, its walls were woven from the crystallized thoughts of 1,000 extinct species, a somber gallery of civilizations that had risen, communed, and eventually faded into the cosmic dust. Here, representatives from 100 worlds gathered, their physical forms as diverse as their homeworlds, yet all united by a single, unshakable belief. They had seen it all. In the center of this august assembly stood Xylar, a Xylotian anthropologist. His species resembled upright, crystalline insects, and his multifaceted eyes reflected the subtle glow of the council chamber. He was a being of logic, of pure, unadulterated reason. His mission, one he had undertaken with the characteristic confidence of his kind, was to present his findings on a newly spacefaring race, Homo sapiens, or as they called themselves, humans. "Esteemed delegates," Xylar began, his voice a harmonious chime that resonated through the chamber. "I have completed my initial observation cycle of the species from the planet designated Terra. My purpose was to classify their psychological profile and determine their suitability for Federation membership." A murmur rippled through the assembled beings. New races were always a gamble. Some were too volatile, others too passive. Most were simply unremarkable. "My initial report," Xylar continued, "cataloged a species of notable physical frailty. No natural armor, limited environmental tolerance, and a lifespan that is, by galactic standards, tragically brief. However, they possess a peculiar form of intelligence, the one driven by pattern recognition and a strange, illogical desire to alter their environment to suit their needs, rather than adapting to it. They call this innovation." He paused, bringing up a series of holographic images. They showed humans in various states, laughing, crying, building towering cities, and creating art. Their social structure is equally perplexing. They form intense emotional bonds with one another, often prioritizing the survival of a single individual over the collective. This is profoundly inefficient. Their history is a chaotic tapestry of conflict and cooperation, creation and destruction. By all metrics of a stable, logical society, they should have annihilated themselves centuries ago. A tall, willowy being from the aquatic world of Thalassa, Ambassador Shore, spoke, its voice like the sigh of waves on a shore. A classic Type 2 juvenile species, prone to emotional outbursts and self-destructive tendencies. We have processed 1,000 like them. They will either moderate their passions or fade away. The recommendation is clear: quarantine and observe for another millennium. Another voice, this one a dry, rasping sound from a mole-like creature from a high-gravity world, grumbled in agreement. "Their concept of nations and borders is primitive. They fight over invisible lines on a map. It is illogical." Xylar nodded, his crystalline form catching the light. "My initial conclusion was much the same. However, the directive was to conduct a deep-dive psychological analysis to understand their core drivers. To do this, I had to abandon passive observation and embed myself within their society. I had to live as one of them." The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence was charged with a new kind of attention. Direct interaction with a pre-Federation species was strictly forbidden without explicit council approval, which Xylar must have received. To immerse oneself in their illogical chaos was considered a form of scientific suicide. For 5 of their years, Xylar continued, his chime-like voice losing some of its harmonic perfection, becoming more hesitant, I walked among them. I adopted a form that would not arouse suspicion, a biological proxy grown from their own genetic code. I experienced their world through their senses. I ate their food, listened to their music, and abided by their strange, contradictory social rules. He began to pace slowly, a sign of agitation his species rarely displayed. Their lives are a cacophony of sensation. They are bombarded by joy, grief, envy, and love in a single day. They make decisions based on gut feelings and hunches, concepts that have no mathematical basis. They create stories not to convey information, but to explore fictional scenarios and hypothetical emotions. They call this art and entertainment. It is a colossal expenditure of energy for no tangible gain. And yet, Xylar said, stopping his pacing, I found myself adapting. I began to anticipate the emotional beats of their music. I felt a strange, pulling sensation in my proxy chest when I witnessed an act of kindness between strangers. I even started to understand their humor, which is almost entirely based on the subversion of expected logical outcomes. It was disturbing. Ambassador Shore leaned forward. You are saying you were becoming compromised by their illogical nature. This is why immersion is forbidden. Your findings are now tainted. No, Xylar said, his voice sharp. My findings are precisely because of that immersion. It is one thing to observe a storm from orbit. It is another to be inside it, to feel the wind and the rain. Only then can you truly understand its power. And it was only by being inside the storm that I discovered the thing that has brought me before you today. The thing that has fundamentally altered my perception of the universe. He turned to face the council, his multifaceted eyes focusing on each delegate in turn. I discovered fear. A wave of dismissive chitters and rustles went through the chamber. Fear was a primal emotion, understood by every sentient being. It was the flight response, or the aversion to pain and death. We all know fear, Xylar, the mole creature rasped. It is a basic survival instinct. To claim this as a discovery is an insult to this council. No, Xylar insisted, his voice resonating with a new, powerful frequency that silenced the room. You do not understand. I do not mean the fear of a predator or of a natural disaster. I discovered a new kind of fear while standing among humans. It was not the fear of them. It was the fear for them. He let the words hang in the ancient, silent air. Let me tell you of the moment of my discovery. I was in a structure they call a hospital. It is a place where they go to be healed. A human female, one I had come to know in my time there, was inside a specialized room. A surgical theater, they called it. Her physical form was failing. A simple, correctable biological error within her. The probability of her survival was statistically high. Over 99%. He paused, the memory vivid in his crystalline mind. I stood in a waiting area with her mate. His name was Kalen. He was a male human, of average build and unremarkable intellect by their own standards. He was a builder, a creator of physical structures. For 3 of their hours I stood with him, and in that time, I witnessed something I cannot explain with any law of physics or logic. Kalen knew the statistics. I had explained them to him. He knew with absolute logical certainty that his mate would survive. And yet, his body was experiencing a cascade of chemical and biological events consistent with a mortal threat. His heart rate was elevated. His breathing was shallow. A cold perspiration covered his skin. His entire being was in a state of profound distress. I asked him, Kalen, why are you afraid? The data confirms her survival. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw an abyss. He said, because the data doesn't matter. She matters, and for a few minutes I can't see her, I can't touch her, I can't tell her it's going to be okay. The not knowing, even when you do know, that's the worst part. Xylar's voice dropped. In that moment I felt it, a resonance, a wave of pure, undiluted terror that did not originate from any threat to my own existence. It was a borrowed fear, a terror that came from Kalen's profound and illogical love for another being. My analytical mind was overwhelmed. I was standing in a perfectly safe, climate-controlled environment, and I was more afraid than I had ever been in my entire life. I was afraid that Kalen's heart would simply stop from the strain. I was afraid that if his mate did not wake up, a part of him would die forever. I was afraid of the depth of the wound that her potential, however improbable, loss would inflict upon him. He turned his back on the council for a moment, composing himself. That was my first lesson. Their fear is not for themselves. It is a currency they spend on one another. A mother feels fear, not of the dark, but of what the dark might hold for her child. A soldier feels fear, not of his own death, but of failing the comrade fighting next to him. A friend feels fear for a friend who is lost, not for their own safety in going to find them. This fear is not a weakness. It is the byproduct of their greatest, and most terrifying strength, their capacity for connection. They forge bonds so powerful that the potential harm to the other is perceived as a direct existential threat to the self. They do not experience the universe as individuals. They experience it as a network of interlocking souls, each one vulnerable because of its ties to the others. Xylar finally turned back to face them, his crystalline form seeming to glow with an inner light. My second lesson came shortly after. The female survived. She recovered fully. When Kalen was finally allowed to see her, I watched him walk into that room. I expected a logical exchange of information, a confirmation of well-being. Instead, he simply held her. He buried his face in her neck, and his body, which had been rigid with fear, finally relaxed. His fear receded, not because the threat was gone, it had been gone for hours, but because he could once again perceive her with his own senses. I watched them, and I understood. This is not a species that will be content to observe the galaxy from a safe distance. They will not quarantine a new world and study it for millennia. They will want to go there. They will want to meet the beings who live there. They will form bonds with them. They will feel fear for them. They will integrate themselves into the fabric of the galactic community, not as observers, but as participants. He took a step towards the center of the chamber. And this is where my true fear, the fear I brought before this council, was born. I looked at the history of this council. I looked at the wall behind you, woven from the thoughts of extinct species. I asked myself, why did they fade? Why are they gone? Was it war? Famine? A cosmic catastrophe? Perhaps for some. But for many, I believe it was something far more insidious. They simply stopped caring. They achieved a state of perfect logical equilibrium. They eliminated conflict, sure, but in doing so, they also eliminated passion. They eliminated the very thing that drives a species to push beyond its limits, to sacrifice everything for a single crazy idea, to look at an uncaring universe and say, "Not on my watch." He pointed a crystalline limb at the council. You look at humanity and see a primitive, emotional, dangerous species. You see their wars and their conflicts. But I have seen what fuels those conflicts. I have seen the love that makes their hatred so fierce. I have seen the fear that drives their courage. If you see the fire and you want to contain it lest it burn you. But I have stood in the fire. And I am telling you, that fire is the only thing in this cold, logical universe that is truly alive. My fear is this, that one day humanity will look out at the galaxy and see a community of races that have grown static, complacent, and afraid of their own shadows. Races that have forgotten how to feel true fear for one another because they have forgotten how to truly love. And in that moment, humanity will not ask to join us. They will pity us. They will see us as the ones who need protection. They will look at our carefully maintained peace and see a beautifully decorated prison. The silence in the council chamber was absolute. Ambassador Shore's luminescent skin had dimmed. The mole creature had shrunk back into its chair. Every delegate was staring at the crystalline being who had dared to walk into the human storm. I came here to report on humanity, Xylar concluded, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. But instead, I have brought back a report on us. We who thought we had transcended fear, we have only ever known the fear of dying. But humanity has discovered something far more terrifying and far more powerful. They have discovered the fear of letting each other down. And that, esteemed delegates, is a fear that can move stars. He fell silent. He had delivered his findings. He had shared the terror and the wonder he had found in the embrace of a flawed, beautiful, and terrifying species. The fate of humanity's application, and perhaps the future of the Galactic Federation itself, now rested in the hands of beings who had just been forced to confront a fear they had forgotten they could feel. The fear that they had already lost the very thing that made life worth living.